Folks, a very warm welcome to our Healthy Gospel Church podcast. It's great to have you back for another series. And again, my guest today is Mairi Murchison. Mairi is what's called a gospel worker, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later. Mairi works up in a church in Inverness, Scotland. That's the capital of the Highlands. And she works for a church called Merkinch Free Church. And we'll hear a wee bit about that later. Mairi, a very warm welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Good. You will be largely unknown to many of our listeners. Can you tell us just a wee bit about yourself? Where were you brought up? How did you end up doing this job where you are?
Sure. I grew up in a town called Drumnadrochit, about half an hour outside of Inverness, and grew up with Christian parents and grandparents. Loved growing up in the rural Highlands. When I was 18, I moved away to Edinburgh and spent 6 years there. I studied at Edinburgh University and then spent a couple of years doing an apprenticeship at a church in Edinburgh.
Okay, that's a lot of material there.
Yeah.
Growing up, you said a town. Now, come on. Drumnadrochit, I have never heard it called a town in my entire life.
Maybe a town now. It was, definitely more of a village, I suppose, growing up.
Great. And what did you do at Edinburgh?
I studied linguistics and English language.
Okay. And you were there at Edinburgh Uni for, 4 years?
4 years.
Good. And then you did an apprenticeship. Tell us a wee bit about that.
Yes, I got to the end of my degree and I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. And the opportunity had come up to do a church apprenticeship. And when I was growing up, I just always felt that I would end up doing some sort of mission work. I'd read a lot of missionary biographies, and I suppose I'd never really seen women working for a church in Scotland, so I just assumed that would be overseas. I had the sort of idea of, I'll go to Africa and, I don't know, build an orphanage or something. That was kind of my narrative of what mission work looked like. But going away to Edinburgh, I began to be more aware of the needs there are in Scotland, of how many people have never heard the gospel. I felt particularly burdened for a lot of my peers I'd grown up with, who didn't really know any other Christians. And so with that growing awareness of the need in Scotland, I thought, maybe this is something I would pursue here. So I spent 2 years at St. Columba's Free Church, and that gave me a great taste of ministry. I was involved with the teens ministry in the church, did a bit of the women's ministry, did some biblical counselling, and then was just involved with sort of day-to-day behind the scenes. Okay,
tell us a little bit about St. Columba's. Describe the context to us.
So St. Columba's is right at the centre of Edinburgh, right at the top of the Royal Mile. It's quite a different context from where I am now, because it's shaped a lot by the university population. It's quite a transient population as well, generally more middle class. So there's a lot of people in their 20s and 30s there, and probably had more of a slightly academic feel to it, just by the nature of the members of the church.
Yeah, and Derek Lamont was minister at that time. Yeah. Derek and Katrina Gray, hospitality ministry, for example,
absolutely.
And vision, passion for the city.
Yeah.
Obviously, did that sort of thing rub off on you? You're not going to say no, obviously, but yeah.
No, it really did. I loved being part of St. Columba's. Hospitality was something that Derek and Katrina had really, they lived that out in their own lives, and that really shaped the church culture of hospitality as well. So that had quite an impact on me. And yes, their vision for church planting across Edinburgh, that just showed me the need for it, and gave me real excitement to see that. So there's several ways in which my time at St. Columba's shaped just the way I saw the local church and the impact it can have.
Okay, so you've got this sense of a calling to mission. Maybe it's a little bit like a stone in your shoe. It's just something that's not going to go away. And increasingly, you felt that call more. Okay, so you're an apprentice at St. Columba's. What happened next?
So I was coming to the end of my time at St. Columba's, and I felt I guess I'd had a taste of ministry, and I thought, yeah, this is something I really would love to pursue. This is something I'm excited about. But at the same time, I just had this increasing burden for the Highlands. I think particularly, one, because of my own link there, but also because I think a lot of rural churches just don't have the same resources as city centre churches. And again, I was thinking of my friends who had grown up there. And so I was really looking to go back to the Highlands, but also work for a church. And there just wasn't an abundance of opportunities there. But I've been following the work of 20 Schemes for a while. Network of churches that are focused on planting and revitalising in deprived areas. And so through following their work, through different free church sort of events, I'd become aware of Merkinch Free Church and of Chris Davidson, the church planter there. So not having lots of different options, I sent an email to Chris, and he didn't really know who I was at that point, and just told him who I was, that I'd come to the end of this church apprenticeship, and did he have a job for me?
Let me guess, he probably says, yeah, we'd love to have you, but we don't have any money or whatever.
It was just amazing how it all worked out. So they had been praying for local, or at least Scottish people, to come and join them in the work there. And obviously I had been praying for an opportunity. So, there was no talk of money at all to start with. It was just come up for a weekend. I spent a weekend with Chris and his wife, Catherine. At the end of it, I thought I would love to be here. And so probably 6 weeks later, I moved up to Merkinch, and I've been part of the team there.
Excellent. So Merkinch is, yes, it's a scheme that's for our American listeners, like a housing project. It's an old part of Inverness. It's got its own distinctive subculture. It's also called the Ferry, because there used to be a ferry ran between South Keswick, which is another name for the Merkinch, and North Keswick on the Black Isle. So locally it's known as the Ferry. Can you describe Merkinch to us?
Yes, so it is one of the oldest parts of Inverness. It's very sort of tight-knit. There's a real sense of community there, and it is quite distinctive from the other parts of Inverness. It is a housing scheme. It's an area of high deprivation. It's actually the 8th most deprived area in Scotland, according to the Scottish Index of Multiple Deprivation. So there are a lot of social issues with that, but there's also lots of things that are great about Merkinch. I think the people are warm and friendly. I love that there's often a sense of history there. There'll be generations of the same family that have lived there for decades. It's also, I think, probably the most beautiful scheme in Scotland.
It is, yeah. It's on the water there, yeah. It's a bit like Cannes in the south of France. Well, if you've got a good imagination, yeah. A lot of folk kind of typecast schemes. They say it's full of drug addicts and alcoholics, and a lot of folk, assume that a church like Merkinch and scheme churches are dominated by these issues. Is it a little bit more complex than that?
It is more complex than that. And I can see why people would think that, because I suppose those are going to be the stories that sort of dominate headlines. And there are certainly a lot of those complex issues of addiction and poverty and unemployment. But it's like anywhere you go, there's such a variety of people. Yes, that would be some people in a housing scheme, but you'd also get people who are just really hard workers providing for their families. Again, that sense of community that's there, and people really looking out for one another. So I think it would be too narrow to say a scheme has got all these problems. I'd say there's just as much a broad variety of people there as there would be anywhere.
Okay, so here's a curveball, Mairi. You are brought up in Drumnadrochit, and Edinburgh University, linguistics. It's a very different world. A cheeky person could say, "Oh, posh girl, Edinburgh Uni grad, working in Merkinch." Can someone from your background work in like a scheme? Or do you have to be a schemie to work in a schemie? What do you need?
Yeah, I don't think you need to be from a scheme background to live and work in a scheme. I did feel self-conscious at first. I thought I walk differently and I talk differently and I dress differently to the people that I'm surrounded by. But I think what's really become clear to me over time is that what's really important is just, one, being consistent, so showing that you're there for the local community and you're kind of there for the long haul. Two, being just transparent and authentic and not trying to pretend to be something you're not. One thing that was I talked to Chris quite a lot about when I started was just the idea that people have often been lied to and deceived a lot, and perhaps that might be more the case in a housing scheme. And so they can tell when you're putting on a front and you're trying to pretend to be something you're not. So I'm never going to try and pretend to be working class because I'm not, and people would know that immediately. So I think the things that really matter are just caring for the local community and the people in it, showing that you're there to stay, and just being transparent about who you are.
I love that. I think it's so true that people want authenticity. They don't really care how you speak, and there's nothing worse than phoniness. And, if you love people, that's the heart of it. So before we came on air, Mairi, we had a little chat about your job title, gospel worker. I mean, I looked up the website, staff, Mairi Murchison, gospel worker. And I thought, that's a terrible job title. You disagreed.
Yep.
You're allowed to disagree. I just thought, well, but I'm beginning to be maybe one round. Tell us how you think it's a great title.
Yes, I really like it as a title because I think it speaks to the heart of what my job is about. So my role does cover a wide variety of things, but at the heart of it, the message that I want to hold out to people is that God sent his son into the world to save sinners and to give us new life, to reconcile us to him and to each other. And that's true for whether I'm speaking to an unbeliever, whether I'm speaking to a new Christian, whether I'm speaking to someone who's been a Christian far longer than I have. And ultimately, there's so many other things that I could be distracted by, but the thing I really want to stay focused on is the gospel, because that's what saves people, that's what changes people. So that's why I like the gospel worker title.
Okay, you're beginning to win me over. So a lot of folk would say, a church in a area of multiple deprivation, you've got to focus on, food banks, you've got to focus on social ministries. That would not be the position, I think, of Merkinch. And, we have another church in Charleston, Dundee, in a similar area. Can you maybe tease out a little bit the relationship between gospel stuff and social? Are they disconnected? What's the connection between the two of them?
I don't think that they are disconnected, and there's still elements of, sort of social elements to what we do as a church. But quite often in housing schemes, people have a multiple services that are already kind of providing for them. So they'll have housing support officers or social workers, or maybe the police are involved in their lives. They'll go to food banks. And so we don't want to be just another service that people go to and make use of. We want to be distinctive in that all these things might make people's lives better for a little bit, but they don't save people.
They're not radical.
And so we will, if there's someone in our church who is struggling, then of course we're going to provide for them in physical and tangible ways. But we don't want to get distracted from our main aim, which is to point people to Jesus. And so even as a church, our vision, our mission statement is to the hurting, the weary, the needy, Jesus brings hope. And so in everything we do, we always want to be saying, ultimately, look to Jesus. And that is where you will find hope. That's where you'll find transformation, not through the things that you can get from a church.
Great. In your time there, you've been there for 3 years. Can you tell us just one or two stories about lives that have been impacted and changed? Obviously, we don't need to name names, but just situations that you've seen the transformative power of the gospel at work.
Okay. One thing that is currently really encouraging for us is that we have a group of teenagers who've started coming to church by themselves. They made friends with a couple of teenagers in our church at school, and then they would invite each other. And now we have a group of about 9 or 10 teenagers who'll come to church every week. And we think that a few of them that have come to know Christ. And so that has just been incredible for us to see that, like, their families aren't coming to church, but we are seeing that transformation in their lives. Their parents are commenting on the difference that they're seeing in their children. And we recently ran a holiday club for younger children, and the teenagers helped at that, and just seeing them being brought into the church family and then being able to serve others and then proclaim the gospel to younger children. And so that's been a recent encouragement.
Okay, that's great. I'm going to drill down on that, because again, that fits with trends that we've been reading about in the last few months. Folk talk about the quiet revival. One can perhaps tease that out. What do you think? I mean, you're nearer that age group than I am. What's going on? What are they asking about? What are they talking about? Are they mostly guys or girls involved? What are you finding?
Yeah, so it's primarily guys who, at the moment, which I suppose does fit with those trends. And yeah, I think I'd probably need to think a little bit more about that, but I don't really know necessarily what's bringing them. But there's obviously something so compelling because they're all inviting each other as well off the back of that. And we don't have any specific teenage ministries that we're doing as a church. A lot of it is just having dinner with them or maybe chatting through the sermon. A lot of the men in our church are great at taking them out to play badminton or football. And so there clearly is a real spiritual hunger there, and they're clearly finding answers that they're not finding elsewhere.
Great. I mean, just to underline it again for our listeners, we're not talking here about 10-minute kids' talks. I mean, Chrissy's sermons are usually 25 to 30 minutes, and they're expositions of the Bible. It's not Christianity light, but the young folk aren't put off by this. No,
and I think that has been so encouraging for me to see that, because initially I was thinking, but we don't do anything, and how will we keep them here? And actually, they're sitting engaged all the way, through an hour-long service, but a half-hour-long sermon.
There's no bells and whistles. It's just singing, prayer. I'm sure your music's good, but it's not Hillsongs. It's not, it's not smoke machines in the platform. Yeah.
So I think for me, even that's just been an encouraging reminder of the power of the gospel, that we don't need all those extra things, actually.
Okay, so that's you've seen change and transformation that young. Any other stories of kind of changed lives?
I think about a year ago we had about 7 new members join our church, and seeing their lives change has been really powerful, actually. Some of them had recently come to faith. Some of them had been in churches previously that hadn't really explained the gospel to them. They didn't really understand that repentance was part of being a Christian. Sure. And so seeing them grow in maturity, seeing their eagerness to serve, and I think what has been just very special for me is that it's not a case of just one person speaking into their life. So it's not the case of Chris will just sit and meet with them, but actually it's the different members of the church family who come around them, who invite them over for dinner, go out for coffee with them, just do day-to-day life with them. And it's that just sense of the whole church discipling new believers. And so I think for me that's been encouraging, then seeing the growth in these people's lives, but also seeing the way that the church family has supported, discipled and cared for them too.
Great. So I want to pick up this idea, you felt a calling to ministry. Again, this podcast is Healthy Gospel Church. It emerges from Free Church of Scotland. We are complementarians in our theology. In other words, we believe in ministry there's specific roles for men and women. That's often defined as what women cannot do. We say, well, women cannot be ordained to ministry, word and sacrament. But one of the great things of the last few years is that we are seeing increasingly women in ministry. And here's one of the ironies, that it's complementarian churches that have the highest number of girls working for them. And again, that's quite an interesting statistic. Did you have good role models when you were beginning to think about ministry? As you looked around, did you see folk doing it? What was your kind of understanding of complementarianism? Are you relaxed with it? Are you fighting with it all the time? Or do you just embrace it?
I think that I have been quite privileged to be a part of churches where women are encouraged to use and develop their gifts, and have served in just a variety of different ways. And I think that I don't think I've particularly struggled against complementarianism. I think that we see throughout Scripture that, the value and the worth and the dignity of women as fellow image bearers. But I think what has been helpful is being part of churches that have recognised the gifts of women, encouraged them to use them in the local church, and also encouraged them to develop them. And so I particularly find this in my own role. We've had on our staff team, we've had some men who are going to pursue ordained ministry, and that'll continue to be the case in the future. But I've never felt like the priority has been for them to develop their gifts. I felt as much like the staff team have encouraged me to take different opportunities or pursue further training. And even as a staff team together, having men and women on it, I think it's so helpful because we're able to give different perspectives on different maybe pastoral situations, different thoughts on their sermons, on what we're doing well as a church, what we're not doing well. And so I think I see the beauty of it, of us being able to serve alongside each other in that way.
Great. So, Merkinch Free Church, in many ways, the centre of it is your worship services on a Sunday afternoon, preaching, stuff like that. You've got other stuff going on, although you're not directly at the centre of it. Tell us a little bit about the counselling centre.
Our counselling centre began about probably in the last year and a half, and we were just aware that was such a need for it. So there's lots of people in our community who have really poor mental health. Often they're on waiting lists for counselling, but the counselling provision generally across the Highlands is just really poor. And so we have a trained counsellor on our staff team at the moment, and he's spearheaded the development of our counselling centre, which is based in Merkinch, and for the people of Merkinch, but also for people throughout Inverness and throughout the Highlands even. And we've just seen such a good uptake with that. I think it's also quite helpful as a sort of evangelistic tool because it's biblical counselling, and we're upfront about that, that it is going to be the Bible that we look to for help, for hope. And people will come who are unbelievers. And already they've seen people come to know Christ through that, the team there. So it's something we'd love to continue developing, just because there has been already such a great response to that.
Yeah. Although you're not a counsellor, you've done some classes in biblical counselling. And everybody does a degree. I guess you'll be doing some counselling. Tell us, I'm guessing as well that counselling at its most basic level is just listening to people and trying to get them to frame their thoughts. How do you use it in your own work?
Yes, I have done the certificate course of biblical counselling, and I think I use it every day, probably in my work. I think that in all sorts of pastoral conversations, what we want to do is to listen well to people, understand them, and then be skilled in applying the Bible to the circumstances of their lives. And I don't think that's something that just trained counsellors should be doing. I think it's something that all church members should be growing in. We have quite an emphasis in Merkinch on one-to-one discipleship. So everyone in the church has at least one one-to-one relationship. And those are great opportunities to, as that relationship deepens, to understand someone well, and then to look to Scripture and think, what does God's Word actually have to say about this? And how might that person's life look different in light of that?
Yeah, that's really interesting. All jobs have got good elements and bad elements. There's stuff I enjoy. I love, in my job, visiting churches, talking to leaders, getting them to think about strategic issues. Stuff I don't like is writing reports and admin. What do you enjoy most about what you do, and what do you enjoy least? I mean, on the whole, I just love my job. I don't think there's another job in the world I would do instead of it, really. I love the relational side of it. I think that's my favourite thing. I love getting to know local people. I love being part of a local community. I think what I found in a housing scheme is that people are far more open to talk about the gospel, and I love that. I love being able to be really direct about that. And off the back of that, I love seeing people change through the gospel. I think it is the greatest privilege really about this job, is seeing over time the Holy Spirit at work in someone's life, and to see them grow in maturity and then begin to disciple other people. In terms of challenges, I mean, I think all ministry has sort of discouragements when you think someone seems maybe really close to coming to know Christ, and then you get really excited, and then you won't see them for maybe the next year. Because people's lives are messy and complex, like they are anywhere really, but it's often just more on the surface, I think, in housing schemes. So I think those sorts of discouragements it's like persevering through those, I suppose. Sure. It's a parable of a sower. Some folks show great promise and they don't develop it. That can be disappointing. Yeah. They are entangled by, Satan. They're entangled by the cares of this world. Others' seed falls on stony ground. Absolutely. You're a bit of a reader. I'm always interested. I'm about nosy about what books have influenced people. I'm almost waiting for someone one day to say, I've never read a book in my life. I've never been influenced by books, but I suspect you've been influenced by some books. Tell us what's been helpful for you.
Yes, I love to read, and so I'd probably struggle to narrow down, but just thinking of ones that I've read recently that have been helpful, I have always found missionary biographies to be a huge encouragement to me. Just growing up and currently, one that I read in the last few years was Evidence Not Seen by Darlene Dowler Rose. But I've also just finished I think it's the Memoir and Remains of Robert Mairi Murchison, which I loved. I just think there's such a helpful eternal perspective in that, and a reminder to and it encourages me to persevere, but also to fix my eyes on the things that are unseen as well.
And McShane was one of the early 20 schemes workers, in a sense. He worked he was a posh boy, and yet he worked in areas of multiple deprivation in Dundee. Yeah,
absolutely. So that, even thinking through that was really helpful when I was reading that. And the other book that comes to mind is The J Curve by Paul Miller, which just is all, I suppose, based around the idea of death leading to life and how we ultimately see that on the cross. But then what does that look like in our own day-to-day lives to die to ourselves and see the life that...
The J curve. Is Paul Miller, he wrote a book on prayer, which I have just recently discovered. I mean, everybody in the world knows about it, except me. And it's been transformative for me. So I'm interested in the J curve, and I'll certainly read that. Okay. Well, Mairi, thank you so much. I know that you're heading off. I don't know when this will be going out, but you're going to Scottish Women in Ministry conference in Gowan Bank, and that'll be great just to get around with a lot of other women in ministry in Scotland. Have you been to one of these things before? What's the women in ministry scene like in Scotland?
I've gone to a couple of them before, and they've always been really beneficial. There's probably not an abundance of us yet, women working in ministry in Scotland. I think there's about 20 of us going this year, but it's always been a really helpful opportunity to network with women in similar, I suppose some might have similar contexts, some not so much, but who understand what it's like to be a woman working in ministry. And I think we can just encourage one another to persevere and speak into one another's lives, and just growing our skills as well. I found it really helpful in terms of thinking through Bible handling and Bible teaching as well. So I'm looking forward to it.
Good. Just before you go, a quick update on Merkinch. Is it growing? Is it just slowly developing bit by bit, numerically and depth of relationships?
Yeah, I think there's been spiritual growth and numerical growth. Last year when we had our 7 new members, I was telling everyone that it was 50% growth because we'd had about 14 members before that. So it's continued to grow since then. I think we'd often have around maybe 40, 45 on a Sunday, and quite often, maybe a quarter, a third of those might be unbelievers as well. So that's been encouraging. And then there is that spiritual growth. So there's growth in depth of relationship between people, which is really encouraging to see, but also people growing in their own relationship with the Lord too. So I think it's we're at a good point.
Great. Yeah, I was going to ask you, it's just occurred to me, you've recently actually, got a house in the scheme. For a while, you were commuting from outside in. How impactful has that been?
It's been huge. I was looking for 2.5 years to find a place in Merkinch, and I was only a few minutes outside of the area, but it made such a difference actually, and being able to put down roots in the local community. So. Being able to get to know my neighbours has been great. I'm in just a part of the neighbourhood where we've got no other church members living there, which I just really see as the Lord's providence of me being able to being physically located in a place where we don't have that many connections, and there, even little things of, walking to the local shops, sitting outside doing my gardening, there's all sorts of people that you get to meet that previously I didn't know. So I'm so thankful for that, and I can see that it's given so many great opportunities already.
Mairi, thank you so much for giving us your time today. It's been super catching up, hearing about your life, your ministry, and also the wider work in Merkinch. Listeners, folks, it's been great to have you with us. Join us for the last few minutes. Please tune in again to our podcasts, whether you're in the car, whether you're jogging, or whether you're walking. Google Merkinch Free Church, see what's happening there. And please pray for Mairi and Chris and the team at Merkinch. Thank you. It's been great having Mairi's company, and listeners, it's been great having your company. Have a great day. Thank you.